Well, hello, and come along as we head down to the White House again and visit with George H.W. Bush. Upon assuming office, Bush made a number of notable senior staff appointments, among them that of General Colin Powell to chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. His other important policy makers included James Baker as Secretary of State and William Bennett as Director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy. In the course of his presidency, he also notably nominated two Supreme Court justices, David H. Schroeder to replace the retiring William J. Brennan, and the more controversial Clarence Thomas to replace Thurgood Marshall. From the onset of his presidency, however, Bush demonstrated far more interest in foreign than domestic policy. On December 20th, 1989, he ordered a military invasion of Panama, part of the plan called Operation Just Cause, in order to topple that country's leader, General Manuel Nogora, who, though at one time of service to the U.S. government, had become notorious for his brutality and his involvement in the drug trade. The invasion, which lasted 4 days, resulted in hundreds of deaths, mostly of the Panamanians, and the operation was denounced by both the Organization of American States and the UN General Assembly. Bush's presidency coincided with world events of large proportion, including the collapse of communists in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, and the reunification of Germany. In November of 1990, Bush met with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev in Paris and signed a mutual non-aggression pact and a symbolic conclusion to the Cold War. They also signed treaties sharply reducing the number of weapons that the two superpowers had stockpiled over the decades of the Cold War hostility. In August of 1990, Iraq invaded and occupied Kuwait. Bush led a worldwide UN-approved embargo against Iraq to force its withdrawal and sent a UN military contingent to Saudi Arabia to counteract Iraqi pressure and intimidation. Perhaps his most significant diplomatic achievement was the skillful construction of coalition of weapons or Western European and Arab states against Iraq. Over the objections of those who favored restraint, Bush increased the U.S. military presence in the Persian Gulf region to about 500,000 troops within a few months. When Iraq failed to withdraw from Kuwait, he authorized a U.S.-led air offensive that began on January 16th and 17th of 19 1991. The ensuing Persian Gulf War climaxed in Allied ground offensive in late February that declimated Iraq's army and restored Kuwait's independence. The strength of his victory over Iraq and his competent leadership in foreign affairs, Bush's approval rating soared to about 90%. This popularity soon waned, however, as economic recession that began in the late 1990s persisted into 1992. Throughout this period, Bush showed much less initiative in domestic affairs, though he initially worked with Congress in efforts to reduce the federal government's continuing large budget deficits. A moderate conservative, he made no drastic departures from Reagan's policies, except in taxes. In 1990, a move that earned him the epitome of policies, or amenity of his conservative supporters and the distrust of many voters, which had backed him in 1988. He reneged on his Read My Lips pledge and raised taxes in an attempt to cope with the soaring budget deficit. Bush's policy reversal on taxation and his inability to turn around the economy. His failure put across what he called the vision thing to the American public ultimately proved his downfall. Bush ran a lackluster campaign for re-election in 1992. He faced a fierce early challenge from Patrick Buchanan in the Republican primary, and then lost votes in the general election to a third-party candidate, Ross Perot. Meanwhile, Bush's Democratic opponent, Bill Clinton of Arkansas, hammered away at issues of deteriorating economy. In the oft-whipped words of Clinton strategy, James Carville, the key issue of the day was the economy, stupid. Bush, the first vice president since Martin Van Buren in 1836, was to succeed directly to the presidency via an election rather than the death of the incompetent, lost to Clinton by a popular vote of 37% to Clinton's 43%. Perot garnished an impressive 19% of the vote. In trying to explain how Bush, always an active man and avid jogger, could have run such a lifeless campaign and performed so poorly in formal debates with Clinton, some analysts postulated that Bush was hampered by medication he had been taking to treat his atrial fibrillation, reportedly caused by Graves' disease. Bush's campaign managers vehemently denied the theory. In his last weeks in office, Bush ordered a U.S. military-led mission to feed the starving civilization of war-torn Somalia, thereby placing U.S. Marines in the crossfire of warring factions and inadvertently causing the death of 18 soldiers. Equally as controversial was his pardoning of 6 Reagan administration officials charged with illegal actions associated with the Iran-Contra affair. Bush and his wife Barbara returned to Houston on the day of Clinton's inauguration, and his little formal involvement in or with the Republican Party successfully ran for president in 2000, becoming the second son of, or his son, George W. Bush, a popular two-term governor of Texas, successfully ran for president in 2000, becoming the second son of a president to win the White House. First was John Quincy Adams in 1824. Another son, Jeb, served as governor of Florida from 1999 to 2007, and unsuccessfully ran for president in 2016. In 2005, former President Bush and Clinton appeared in a series of television advertisements to raise funds for victims of the Indian Ocean tsunami that happened in 2004 and Hurricane Katrina that happened in 2005. Bush was named UN Special Envoy for the disaster resulting from the Indian Ocean tsunami. In 2011, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And with that, I will see you all in the next one.